Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, good evening. Oh, one of those things. It's the same old Arsenal podcast. It's me, Chris Howard, Suburban Gooner Chris, joining you. And I've already fudged the intro, but that doesn't matter because it's the summer. And let's be honest, we're all just on a bit of a downturn. We're all on our holidays, hopefully. Although I suspect one of my guests will be disappearing off to America to cover the first team at some stage. So he won't get to have a holiday. Maybe it is a holiday, but thank you very much for joining us for the latest edition of the same old Arsenal summer series, one in, one out, one bangs. This is most likely to be the last in the series we've been running throughout summer. This is episode number 6. We've had some really, really great guests that have joined us talking about the one player they'd love to sign, the one player that they would love to sell, and one player that they think is going to bang next season. I've got 2 fabulous guests with me today. It is Melvyn. The only way is Arsenal marks. Melvyn, I love that intro. How you doing, mate? You all right?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks for inviting me on. Looking forward to this.
Good to have you on. Good to have you on. And Kaya Kaynak from Football London. Kaya, how you doing, mate? You good?
Yeah, very good. Enjoying. Finally in England, we've got some nice weather, so I'm enjoying that.
I know it's good, isn't it? We were just talking, just to let those of you in the green, those of you in on the background, we were just talking in the virtual green room about the fact that this will probably be about a 30-minute podcast, mainly because, let's be honest, we all want to get out there and enjoy the sunshine. So wherever you are, hopefully you're enjoying the sunshine too. And hello, Emerson, for joining us as well. You can pop any comments you want in the chat. We'll try to get through as many as possible, but a little bit of housekeeping. We are sponsored by the fabulous Ruth Beck Art, and Ruth does some amazing work. You can check her out on her Etsy show, where she's got a variety of different things that she's working on. You can get a whole range of Arsenal-based stuff. I think we've deleted it from the back-end system here, so I can't show you any of the stuff, which I normally do, but we're delighted to be sponsored by Ruth Beck Art. So, concept time. If this is new to you, if this is the first time that you've checked out this podcast, if this is the first time you've checked out this format, one in, one out, one bangs. So, Kaya and Melvyn have probably together, they've saved Mikel Arteta from a swimming pool, because it turns out, even though he grew up in San Sebastian by the beach and probably has a couple of pools in his household, he can't swim. So these two lovely gentlemen here have saved his life. They've dragged him from the swimming pool, and he said, guys, thank you very, very much. And as a result of your charity and saving my life, I'm going to grant you 2 wishes, and just for a bit of fun, one additional thing. And those wishes are: I will buy any player that you want, and I will sell any player that you want from the Arsenal team. And just for fun, tell us one player that is going to absolutely smash it next season, just so that I can give him a little bit more game time. Now, caveat time. Some of you guys will obviously know Kaya from his reporting. Kaya is today an Arsenal fan. He is not reporting on anything that he's heard. This is Kaya, the Arsenal fan, giving us his wish list. You know, he's just saved Mikel Arteta's life, and he wants to have his moment or two in the sun to just whisper into his ear, just go and get this guy. So this isn't a exclusive Kaya Kaynak reports. He saves that for obviously his full-time job. But that's where we're going to kick off, actually. You've saved his life, Kaya. Talk to me. Who are you saying to Mikel Arteta? Because now you have the power to say, go get this player. Who are you going for? And before I let you answer that, Kaya did this last season, and he went for Ivan Toney. Would you stick with Ivan Toney, or are you going for something fresh this year?
I don't think so. I actually used to work as a swimming teacher, so this intro, this whole concept is even better than I can imagine. You know, I can offer Mikel a free swimming lesson in with the deal. I think that's fair. But no, I wouldn't go for Ivan Toney, purely because I don't think Arsenal need that fixed out and out number 9 like I thought they did this time last season. I don't know if we did this before Kai Havertz had signed, but when Kai Havertz signed, he was as a midfielder, right? And we all expected him to come in as this left 8 who was going to take Arsenal up a level from Granit Xhaka, and, you know, best laid plans and all that. He ended up as the number 9 to end the season, and was really, really good in that position. And in my opinion, it means that Arsenal don't need an out-and-out 9, as it were. I think what they'd be better served getting is a player who can play across the front line. So I think someone who can play with Havertz, with Gabriel Jesus, alongside Saka, cover for Saka. that kind of thing. And the guy who ticked all those boxes for me, and I know it's probably potentially unrealistic given that the team who he is currently at do not want to sell and have no real reason to sell. But it's Alexander Isak at Newcastle. I just think he would be a superb addition to this Arsenal team. I think can play out wide, can run in behind, which is what Arsenal have lacked a little bit. I think Martinelli didn't have the best of seasons last season, and I think we might get onto that a little bit in going forward. But yeah, I just think maybe Arsenal needs something a little bit more in behind, a little bit more of a threat. I think when teams sit deep against Arsenal, as they so often did last season, you need someone with twinkle toes who can just dance through the box. And Isak's got that. He's got that close control. He's got that lovely Thierry Henry style finish, sort of the left side of the ball, inside of the foot. I love that. And he's clinical. He's proven he's clinical in the Champions League and in the Premier League. So it's very difficult to find that kind of player. And unfortunately, Newcastle got to him first. Arsenal were interested, as we all remember that January, where they were going after a few strikers. But yeah, Newcastle got to him first. And it's hard to not wonder what might have been if Arsenal had ended up with Alexander Isak. And I think, again, why he'd be perfect is he's not such a big name that, I don't know, let's just hypothetically say Haaland came in, he'd have to play every week, right? Whereas if Isak comes in, if he's on the bench maybe one week, it's not the biggest of deals. So ideally, I think you want someone who doesn't come in and supersede every forward option and then sort of everyone gets upset and you know, they don't want to play anymore. I think you want someone who comes in and is sort of at the same level, if not slightly higher, and then you can sort of mix and match those forward options because Arsenal have got fantastic forward options. I don't think there's this 40-goal-a-season striker out there that everyone wants to add to Arsenal's lineup, but there are a few 20-goal-a-season strikers out there and forwards out there, and I think Alexander Isak would be a magnificent addition to the Arsenal team.
Yeah, and you're not the only person to say that, I have to say. So we had Harry Simeo on who said the same thing, Alexander Isak. We also had Johnny Cochran from the from the Arsenal Opinion podcast, who also said the same thing. The thing that I found interesting about Isak, and I only really looked it up when Harry came on, was I just made this assumption. He's really injury prone and, you know, you're not going to see the best of him. But last season, he played 38 games and he got 25 goals. And you look at those numbers and you think, do you know what? That's a player in there. Melvyn, I don't want to cut you out of this before you go to your choice. Your views on Alexander Isak, would you have him?
Oh, every day. It's a great call. The only problem is I don't think we've got a chance of getting him. He's not one of those. That's the problem.
Hey, this is a wish list. This is a wish list.
A wish list. Oh, so no, fair enough. Well, on that basis, I'd vote for him as well, but obviously I can't do that. A great footballer. He's got his movement's very good, as you've said, and he's a team player, and he makes it easier for the midfield players when he plays, running into channels and everything. And he's part of the move. He's even the beginning of the move sometimes. No, and he's a bit ice. He's quite cool in front of goal. So yeah, we could do with something like that. I mean, he's played that many games. Would he be that happy to be on the bench for so long? You said he wouldn't mind. I'm not too sure now. You know,
do you think he would be a bench player? Or do you think he'd start?
So when I say bench player, I think maybe like I'm in my head. I'm imagining him on the left wing, starting in that position, and whether he'd want to come in and not start in his preferred position. I think that's definitely a fair debate to have. When I say sort of bench player, I mean more like you can mix and match, and you can play sort of the different front lines for what's needed against the different teams. And I think Mikel Arteta wants that. He wants sort of a Swiss Army knife squad. And I think a player like Isak is what he hasn't really got. So just in terms of adding something that he hasn't got, that was my thinking behind that.
Yeah, I like it. So Melvyn, from your perspective, Kaya's already, I mean, you both saved Mikel Arteta's life. So, you know, you got a freebie there. Isak's already in. So who are you punting for?
Well, I thought I did more of the work, actually. He just helped me pull him out the pool. But I would actually go for, and the trouble is I haven't seen a lot of this player, but what I saw I really liked, and I think he'd fit into our team very well. Is it Merino, the Spanish midfielder? 6'2". He's strong. I think we need someone who can a bit more physical in midfield. Rice is fantastic. And we saw in the European games that Rice, when you play him in our own half the whole game, it nullifies him. He's so good. Yes, he's good at breaking up play. That's brilliant at that. But also when he goes forward, Rice, he doesn't have to worry about what's behind him. And with England, he obviously was given the job of not crossing the halfway line, who had to buy a ticket to do it. So I like someone like that type of player to give Rice the freedom because he is so good. And can you imagine Rice and someone like this guy breaking up players? Well, the pair of them. I think if you've got a good defence, stroke midfield, then you can attack at will. And that would be the player that I would think, you know what, I could see him doing a job for us, a very good job. And we cannot rely on Partey. We don't know if he's going to actually stay. It seems like he might. And who knows, a month or two in. And Jorginho, however good he is the type of player that he could have 4 or 5 fantastic games. And then all of a sudden, in the back of your mind, you remember at the end of the season, he looks a bit tired and we haven't played him. He might be a bit injured. And it's like all these doubts. But when he put the shirt on and he came on, he was very, very good. But you cannot rely on Jorginho, 38 league games and another 10 other games. So we need someone consistently there. And I think if we fill that gap, and the other 2 players, Partey at certain times, bringing him on, or Jorginho bringing him on, for certain games or certain times within a game. I mean, he's very good if we're 1-0 up and, we're on the back foot. Is the type of player you bring on and go, right, let's just hold it there. And he's so experienced. He'll slow the game down and we can just get on and get the points and move on. So that would be it for me, that guy. Yeah.
So you're going for Mikel Merino. It's almost like he's been catching up on some of the stuff that you've been writing, Kaya. But do you want to give us some thoughts from your perspective? You can either go Kaya, the Arsenal fan, or you can go Kaya, the journalist that's been doing some research on this, or you can blend the two because obviously the two exist.
I'll get the journalist bit out of the way first. Yeah, the interest is there, but there's lots of teams in Spain that like him as well. So that makes things a little bit tricky. And obviously, as Melvyn was saying, the Arsenal midfield position is quite congested at the minute. So I guess if he's coming in, a bit like when we were discussing Isak, he wants to come in to know he's coming in to start games. And obviously, competition is a thing at any big club. But with Jorginho, Partey, Rice potentially playing that position as well, it does make things a bit tricky for him. I think it's a tougher sell, but he's definitely a cheaper alternative. He's available for a lot less. He is 28, so he's sort of the upper end of the age spectrum. And my only sort of question mark over it would be if you look at that midfield position, Rice aside, it's an older sort of demographic, if you like. Partey is and Jorginho, both the wrong side of 30. So I wonder if they might go for someone a bit younger. And Marino's teammate at Real Sociedad, Martin Zubimendi, was a player I was really toying with to go for because the way he came on, I mean, if any other team in the world loses Rodri at half-time in the major final, it's a massive deal. Yeah. Martin Zubimendi comes on second half against England in the Euros final. You don't even notice Rodri's missing. That's the quality of the player he is. I think he's so good. I think he's a really, really, really talented player and like sort of a similar profile to Busquets is what they say. Those who watch him every week in Spain, I only saw a glimpse of him in the Euros, but I really like what I saw and I've watched bits of him in Spain and he's a player I also looked at before. Again, I don't know if he's interested in coming, which is a shame because I think he'd be a really superb addition. But I agree with Melvyn, that position, that sort of defence midfield position, I think it does need addressing because Partey, as you say, is very injury prone. Jorginho, I don't think it's fair to rely on him for 38 games a season. And I think Declan Rice is at his best when he's further forward. So, yeah, I think that's something else we do need to address this summer.
Yeah, I think the Merino one's quite an interesting one. And as you guys have said, as you said, Kaya, he played 45 times for Sociedad last season, 8 goals, 5 assists, 14 yellow cards. Man likes a tactical foul, clearly. 3,601 minutes. Got that information from Transfermarkt. It's an interesting one. It feels like a sort of a... I'll get your view on this, Kaya, and then Melvyn. This feels to me a bit like an Edu sort of early 2000s type transfer in that it's a player that is clearly of a certain level of quality. He probably is not going to play every single week, but I don't think any of us would doubt that Edu had a massive part to play in the Invincible season and then the season or two before he signed. So what's your take on that? Like, do you feel, Kaya, that he is that kind of Edu type player that is, if the Arsenal first choice 11 is wheeled out like the Invincibles, we could all sort of reel off that name, and the likes of Edu or the likes of Ray Parlour aren't in it, but they made big contributions, right? Yeah,
those kind of guys are really important. Not everyone could be a Declan Rice signing. You need your Leandro Trossard just as a sort of an equivalent, or maybe a Jakub Kiwior at the back, guys who can come in and be relied upon to do a job throughout the season. And you can't have every player costing. It's not Manchester City. Not every player can cost 50 or 60 million. Arsenal need to shop a bit smarter. So I think Mourinho would be a fantastic signing. Like I said, the age thing is the only thing I'd have a question mark over, but he doesn't look like he's showing any signs of slowing down. So I think he'd be a really, really good deal. And I think you need those players. And we saw this in the back end of last season when Arsenal was struggling. Leandro Trossard came in to the forward line, stepped up and almost carried Arsenal over the line in the title race and stepped up in big Champions League games time and again. So you need guys like that off the bench who are going to make a huge difference and who can come in and start when players get injured. And Arsenal have had a lot of injuries in that defensive midfield position. So I think Mourinho would be a superb addition to the squad.
Yeah, absolutely.
Melvyn, 28, we're frowning because the guy's 28. We've got a very, very young squad, and 28 is not old. And as someone that's experienced, I think we've got to buy a person that's going to hit the ground running. This squad is young, but we've had 2 seasons where we've nearly done it. I don't want their heads to start dropping, that they miss out again, because all of a sudden the confidence will go. The Salibas of this world will go, look at me. He's not old, but I want to win something. If the clubs around him are winning things and he's not, that's going to have an effect on him. So don't think we can afford to say next season, see how we go. No, next season we've got to go for it. And if you've got to buy a 28-year-old, it might only give you 3 or 4 seasons. I think, in my opinion, we ought to go for it.
Yeah, it's a really, really good shout. It is a really, really good shout, and squad composition and balance, experience, blending that youth and the more wise, sage old head is important. And I think that's the reason why we went for the likes of Jorginho. We've looked at the likes of Trossard, and a good shout there on the Trossard reference, because I just think that particularly last season, it feels like if a player falls out of form, like Martinelli maybe did or didn't. Having someone like that just stepped in, that was the difference. That could have been that was the difference between an 89-point season and maybe a 79-point season. But Melvyn, let's go into the slightly less positive side, which is that Mikel's now said, well, we've got to pay for this Mikel Merino and Alexander Isak. So who am I bidding off? I'll start with you, and then we'll go to Kaya.
Right. Well, this is a tough one for me because I've got a list of them. So sorry to be so negative.
You've only got one. He's only selling. He's only selling one.
I'm only selling one. I think it's got to be I think we've got to sell this player because of the money we could get. Obviously, no point selling a player and getting 2.5 million. I think we'll get possibly decent money for Eddie. 25 million, 30. I'm thinking of in this market. I think it's not the greatest, but it's a decent amount of money, and I think that. I'm not his biggest fan. I know that he's scored a hat-trick against Sheffield United, and he's got the odd goal. I think at Man United he scored a couple as well, did very well. But the amount of times that he seems to be just going through the motions. I might be wrong. He might be given 100%, but he's come on sometimes as sub, and you can play on your fingers. What's he going to do first? Give away a foul or be caught offside? There's so many games where that's all he's done when he's come on. And it's a shame because he has got some talent, but I just don't think. I think there's something missing. So for me, someone decent money, I think we should sell him, because I think that if Martinelli gets anything like his form back, and Trossard and so the other players, I think there shouldn't be a place for him in our team. We shouldn't have to rely on Eddie. I'm afraid. I'm sorry to be so negative, but there we go.
Yeah, I'm going to bring Kaya in on that just to get your thoughts as well. But from my perspective, lovely guy, Hale graduate. He needs games. It's a bit like Smith Rowe. He needs game time, and he needs to go somewhere where he's just going to play 35, 40 games so that we can see, are you a 20-goal a season striker? That's it, in my opinion. Kaya, I want to get your views on Eddie Nketiah, and then you're one out. But before I let you talk, your choice last season, which, well, I mean, you nailed that one, was Rob Holding. So. So that felt like low-hanging fruit, to be honest with you. But yeah, let's get your views on. You can either talk about Holding, you can talk about Eddie Nketiah, and then you're one out as well, please, mate.
I'm not sure there's an awful lot more that needs to be said about Rob Holding, to be honest. I don't want to dig into him anymore. He was a good servant for Arsenal when he was here, but I think his time at Palace, where he still can't get into the team, even though they're playing a back three now, I think that tells you a little bit about the quality of the player he was. But yeah, just on Eddie, I think. Melvyn makes a really good point about him coming off the bench. Last season, he came off the bench 22 times for Arsenal. And can anyone guess how many goals he scored off the bench?
I'll say none.
0?
It was one. One against Fulham, and that was when he came on at half-time. So that's slightly different from coming on a little bit later in the game. And from players coming off the bench, you need a bigger impact. You need, as we were mentioning before, with Trossard, and not every squad player is going to be Trossard, but Trossard scored loads of goals off the bench. I don't have the exact numbers to hand, but Eddie Nketiah knows, and he knew when he signed the Arsenal contract extension, that his role in the squad was not necessarily going to be week in, week out, starting number 9. He knew he was going to be coming off the bench more often than not. And listen, his argument has always been, give me starts and I will score. And when he starts, he does tend to score. And you know, that's undeniable. But realistically, his role in the squad is to be there when the regular forwards aren't there or when Arsenal need a goal late in the game. And he's not fulfilled it. And I don't want to be harsh on him because I think he's a lot better than people give him credit for. And I think the season before last, when Gabriel Jesus got injured, it was Eddie Nketiah that sustained the title charge before Leandro Trossard came in and sort of took over the baton. And I think people forget that with the goals against Man U and the goals against Brighton, they were really important. And at the start of last season, he was very key. But by the end, he wasn't even getting off the bench when Arsenal were needing goals in big games. And it felt like Mikel couldn't even trust him. And if you're not going to trust him in those kind of situations, then when are you going to trust him? And I think, like Melvyn was saying, you can get a decent bit of money for him because he's England under-21's record goal scorer. He's got a good record when he starts. He was fantastic in youth football. And I think the longer you hold on to him, the more his value goes down. So it's a difficult thing where you look at interest, and Palace, they were a team that were interested in January. Marseille are interested now, and obviously Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang has left Marseille today, so they need a forward. So that would make sense. And I wrote today in a piece that he's potentially interested in that move. So yeah, I think it's a case of, you know, how much money can you get for him? And if it's around the 20 million mark, then I'd say keep him because I think he's worth more than that. But if you get 30, 35, similar to what Arsenal got for Balogun last summer, then he's been a great servant, but I think it's time to pull the trigger and you can get someone else for however much it costs and who can improve the level of the squad. And just in terms of sheer numbers, I know Arsenal's forward line hasn't always been the best at staying fit, and Jesus has had his injury problems. But if you look in that centre forward position where Eddie plays, because he can't really play out wide, he's behind Havertz, he's behind Trossard, and he's behind Gabriel Jesus. So it's going to take 3 players being injured for him to realistically start a game on a regular basis. And I don't see that coming. So yeah, it's harsh, I think, because people go over the top with criticising Eddie, and I'm always wary of that. But I think it's time to go. Yeah.
And just before you give us your one out, just to put some numbers onto that. So since the beginning of or middle sort of February, he's played around about 100 minutes. Well, actually since January, from January to May, he played roughly 100 minutes. He didn't actually get off the bench for 6 of the last 6 games, and then he played 3 minutes against Villa, 1 minute against Brighton, and then 24 minutes against Luton. So it just really sort of underlines what you're saying. But Kaya, let's go for yours. So Eddie, is we've got a nice meaty fee because Melvyn gets to pick the fee as well. Be realistic here. Don't say you're gonna offload. I don't know, Fabio Vieira for 100 million. But what are you thinking in terms of your one out?
So I think my one out, and it's more for the good of the player than wanting to let him go, but it's Emile Smith-Rowe. I think for his sake, I think it's time to move on. There's a difference between what Arsenal say and what Arsenal do when it comes to Emile Smith-Rowe. If you ask Arteta about it in a press conference, he'll wax lyrical, say how much he loves him, that he wants to keep him, and when teams have come in for him in the past, so I remember last summer, Chelsea came in towards the end of the window, West Ham, Palace, I think, were interested, and Villa. Sorry, Palace were interested this summer, Villa were interested last summer. West Ham came back in January, Arsenal said no again. Now it looks like Palace are interested again, and Fulham are the front runners for the signature. And I just think if you can get 30 million for Emile Smith-Rowe, you kind of take the money and run, because I think he's a fantastic player, and I think if he goes to Fulham, there will be games and performances where we'll think, God, I wish we kept him, because he's such a good player. And I don't think Fulham will be his end destination. I think he'll go to Fulham and then go on somewhere better. But I think in the short term, Mikel doesn't seem to want to use him. He started 4 games in all competitions last season. That's not good enough for a player who's 23 and is finally playing pain-free, finally over the injuries and needing to get minutes to build up his fitness. So I think for his sake, I think he has to go. I think he probably needs first-team football and deserves first-team football as well, because he's good enough to be a regular at a Premier League team and, in my opinion, a top 6 Premier League team. I just don't think it's Arsenal because of the players that are ahead of him in the pecking order. And I think it's almost cruel to hold on to him if you're not going to use him. And Mikel was showing a reluctance to use him. So it's with a heavy heart. Unlike with Rob Holding last season, that was very easy. This is very difficult. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, last season, like you said, 19 appearances in total, 475 minutes. It's just, and if you compare that to Eddie Nketiah, the amount of minutes that he got and the amount of, even if it was just here and there and towards the end, he just wasn't favoured. But Melvyn, any sort of final thoughts on Smith Rowe before we go to your one to bang next season?
Yeah, it's going to probably happen. I'll be very sad. Not last season, but the last few seasons, he's been my favourite player. I absolutely adored watching him play. He gets the ball. He's always looking to go forward. He's got so much in his locker. He can score goals. His movement's fantastic. It's just a pleasure to watch. He's the type of player, and we've got a few of them, I must say, but he's the type of player that you pay money for to watch. The only thing is last season, and it was obviously he didn't get a lot of playing time, but he seemed to miss a lot of open goals last year, which was quite strange. So many chances, you think, and he just missed it. Well, a season before that, he just done it with his eyes closed. It's such a shame because he's not lazy. He wants to do it. It's not as if he's holding back. He's just been injured. No one get injured at the right time, but he's been injured at the wrong time, and it just hasn't been that space for him to actually fit into. I mean, you could play him anywhere. You could play him Trossard's been fantastic, don't get me wrong, when he's coming for Martinelli. But he could have got a lot more time when Martinelli wasn't playing particularly well, in my opinion. But listen, we're only allowed to have so many players in the squad. We've got to sell some before we buy some, so I can understand him going. And I honestly wish him so much. You're right. If he goes to Fulham, he won't finish up there. You'll see him in an England shirt for whoever he plays for, and he'll go to a top 6, top 4 club because I think he's very, very good. And it's just one of those things. Sometimes things just don't work out. I'm afraid that's where we are at the moment.
Yeah. All right, then. Let's go for your one to absolutely bang next season. So Mikel has said, just out of interest, which player should I be playing the most next season to get the best out of?
Well, it's one of two. If it's playing the most, this guy probably won't play the most. So I'll switch it then. Because I was going to say Jesus. Because I think
you can. We've had a few people that have said Jesus. So if you want to say this guy's going to bang, you can do that. That was the original. That's the original brief. Is which player's going to bang?
I reckon you might see a different Jesus. He went off. There was a different Jesus who played last year to the first season. He had injuries and whatever. I think he's had a whole. He didn't go away with the Brazilian squad. I think he looks like they say he's lost a bit of weight. And I think he's probably got a bit of hunger and whatever back. I think no one's expecting him to do well next year. I mean, he's not in anyone's mind to play in the first team, is he? With the last 6 months of the season, he hardly got a game. I think he could come back and look like the player we first signed. I really do. And I hope I'm right. I think he could be the one that's the unexpected one. Because there always is one, isn't there, every season? Someone like Over, you think, oh, what's happened to him? I think he could be the geezer. He could be the one.
I love it. So you're not the only person that said that. Mark King also said Gabriel Jesus too. A lot of people gave a lot of love for Jurrien Timber and Ethan Nweri. But Kaya, from your point of view, which player, in your opinion, is going to absolutely smash it next season?
You've taken the words out of my mouth there. Jurrien Timber was my one I was going to go for. I think
show your workings.
We all remember that pre-season, and we all remember that Community Shield game where Jurrien Timber played, and we thought, blooming heck, this is a player. And we were sort of having debates of, what's Ben White going to do? Where's Ben White going to play? What's going to happen at right back? Is Ben White going to be our starting right back next season? That's how good Timber was in the space of a month. He didn't even play competitive football, and we were all having those kind of conversations. And it was so cruel 45 minutes into his season to get the ACL. And he'd never had an injury really in his career. And typical Arsenal, he comes and gets an ACL immediately. And I think there's such a good player there. He's so aggressive in his tackles. He's so good defensively 1v1. He's so quick. He's so good on the ball as well. He's everything Mikel Arteta would want in a defender. He can play anywhere across the back line as well. Played left back. He never played left back in his career before that Community Shield game. Comes in against Manchester City, does so. I think he played there in his youth career before, but he never played there professionally as far as I'm aware. comes in against Manchester City, admittedly Community Shield and all the caveats, but was fantastic. And I think that's a really versatile and, you know, a useful asset who I think next season for Arsenal will be invaluable. And I think we spoke about, again, the sort of the squad players keeping the level high, and with if Marino comes in or with what Trossard does, Jurrien Timber, you know, the Arsenal back four last season was relatively set. There's potentially a spot at left back if Timber wants to come in there, but I think as it stands, Timber can come in and raise the level, or certainly maintain the level. Obviously, there's the question mark, as there is with any player who comes back from an ACL, will they be the same player? And I think we all hope, and we have our fingers crossed. But yeah, they've been able to sort of manage his comeback. They've not had to rush him back quickly, which might be good for him. And we'll see another preseason campaign, and fingers crossed it'll be the one where we finally get to see him in the real season and he does the business.
Yeah, we really need that. And do you know what's really oddly exciting me, particularly, I mean, we all know about the Calafiori links. We won't go into any detail about that today, but if you think about if he does come in, like the strength and depth of that defensive line, I can totally see us having another season like last season where we were just very, very difficult to score against. That is my hope. And I'm quite excited from a defensive point of view. It's whether or not we get those players come in from an attacking point of view, just to almost keep the consistency, because there's going to be more Champions League games. There's going to be more. There's going to be an expectation that we need to win something. So I don't think just binning off the League Cup maybe, but binning off the FA Cup, it's not going to be a thing. And we didn't do that last season. You know, we were unlucky against Liverpool, but I think there's going to be an expectation that we need to come home with a shiny silver trinket at some stage next season. I think there's a few Arsenal fans that have said that as well. We're just coming towards the end, but I wanted to just get a general view. Phil Mack has asked a question, so I'll start with you, Kaya, and then go to Melvyn before we rock off for the day. But it's more a question around selling, which I just think is interesting, because he said, is any chance we don't sell Partey, Eddie, Rami, or Ramsdale if they go up on loan because we're terrible at selling? You guys don't have to answer that specifically, but I guess my question to you is, Kaya, I'll start with you and then Melvyn. Are you optimistic that Arsenal are going to get those players or a set, not those players, but players out the door, so that people don't start to see Arsenal as a poor selling club, which I don't think is necessarily true, but there's a narrative, isn't there?
I guess it is and it isn't true. There's people want to, and there's journalists in the media, we're very, very guilty of this, but you find a narrative based on a few things when obviously each individual sale has its own individual circumstances. And I think for certain players, if Arsenal don't get big money, then they've done badly. So we were spoken about Nketiah and Smith Rowe. If they get less than 30 million for either of those, then I think that is poor selling. Similar for Reece Nelson, if you get sort of less than 15 million, probably poor selling. And there's a few players. Ramsdale is another who, if you get less than 20, 25 million for him, I think that's poor selling. So it's up to Eddie now to prove it. And I think he's always sort of been keen to point out there are mitigating circumstances, and he inherited a very poor hand when it came to the players he had to shift to sort of accelerate the project and on the line. And if he hadn't did what he did earlier on in terms of terminating the contracts of Ozil, Socrates, Mustafi, Kolasinac, Pepe, those kind of guys, Willian, those kind of guys, then Arsenal wouldn't be where they are at this stage. It wouldn't have happened this quickly. We'd all be, a lot slower on the line. So I do think now's the time where Arsenal are in a good position to sell players. The contract things aren't really an issue for most of them. Partey aside, he's got 1 year left, but I think he's pretty much the only one who's got 1 year left. Like Jorginho, although I don't think they're in a rush to sell him. So with that in mind, they're in a strong position to hypothetically sell those players, and they should be able to get good value for them. So yeah, it's time for Eddie to prove himself. And I think there have been cases where Arsenal haven't sold as well as they could have done. I think of Bernd Leno for an example.
Yeah.
3+5, not really good enough for a player who's a really, really good goalkeeper. I think they could have got more money than that. So I think it's time to, and if you're upset about a narrative, the best thing to do is to go and disprove it. And it's up to Arsenal and their hierarchies to do that this summer.
Lovely. Melvyn, final word from you then, sir, on Arsenal and their ability to sell.
Well, they're in a much better position. We're not selling players because they're poor, like we've done like those few players you just mentioned. I got shivers down my spine remembering those. So please don't do that again. But the players we've got now to sell are decent players, not like we did before on ridiculous wages. So I think, for example, like Ramsdale, for example, 25 million is a steal for me. If I was a Premiership club and I could get him for 25, I'd go bring it all day long. I mean, he's better goalie now than when we bought him. All right, he's had his problems because we've got this other guy in and he's taken a confidence hit. But he's a better goalkeeper. He's proved himself. People weren't sure about him when we first signed him, and he's actually done very, very well. People forget how well he's done for us. So I think 35, 40 for Ramsdale. And I hope I'm not being too biased. But anyway, but the other players, they're all worth money now. So I'd like to get a bit more. But at the end of the day, if we've got to take a fiver here and a fiver there to get to make room for other players, then I think we've got to do it. We've got to manage it that way. You've got to sell players to bring players in. You can't have these squads anymore. It's not allowed. And we don't want to be a Man City, do we? Because we ain't going to get away with it if we do.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So we're on time for the day. I'm going to let these gentlemen go off and enjoy the sunshine. I think Kaya said he's off to play a little bit of football. Not enough on reporting on football, talking about football, thinking about football. Man loves to play it as well. I'm far too old for that, so I'm going to go and sit in the garden. But just from my guests, thank you very much. Thank you for those of you guys who have asked a couple of questions in the chat as well. As I said right at the start of the podcast, we are sponsored by Ruth Beck Art. Check her out on Etsy. Just go to her shop. She's got a whole plethora of different things.
Look at the stuff up there. That's from her.
Yeah, there we go. Look, you're the advertisement for me, Melvyn.
That's right.
I didn't need the banners, but Melvyn, thank you very much for joining me.
No, thanks for asking me, and it's great to be on with Kaya. Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate it.
And Kaya, as always, thanks, mate.
Cheers, Chris, and cheers, Melvyn. And yeah, thanks everyone for watching. It was really fun.
Yep, good stuff. Hopefully you're going to enjoy this. Amanda hasn't told me when she's doing her next podcast, so I can't get told off for not advertising it, but she'll be back next week, I'm sure. But from myself, from Melvyn, and from Kaya, thank you very much for listening, watching, and hopefully we'll catch you next time on the Same Old Arsenal podcast. Latest, peeps.